back when it was called, I was on cloud back in the days when it was called On Demand, and it, it's pretty crashy. And it was basically server, running on an AWS instance. So been with it for a long time. I know we all care deeply about all things Confluence. Otherwise, why would we be at this AMA about a Confluence feature? So what I did is I went down through the whole kind of comment thread for this particular feature. And I tried to summarize a lot of the questions and concerns and also like positives that people put in there, mainly so that we could condense the amount of time that we have here, because we just don't have that much time. Andy, if you wouldn't mind muting, perfect, thank you. Yeah, so Sam, I guess I don't know if I need to introduce you. I think everybody knows you from the post already.
Well, just in case, since this is going to be recorded, I assume other people will watch this afterwards. I'm Sam Ugalava. I am a product manager on Confluence Cloud. And mostly the area of ownership that I work on is the whole creation and publishing flow. So I've been leading a charge around fearless creation for the last year and a half or so. And this is one of our features that is part of fearless creation.
And as far as I understand from this effort, basically Sam's team is taking a whole bunch of technical debt and trying to pay it off. That's my perspective. That's not officially from Atlassian. Just seeing a lot of small features that I'm sure were implemented well at the time, but they're just these ragtag bits all over Confluence right now, trying to bring them together, including this feature, which is like Confluence has been creating these drafts forever. I only learned this was happening like last year when the homepage was redesigned, and I found that draft section, and I was like, oh my God, like, I don't even know how many drafts I found sitting in there, right? So this is not as if, a core part of how Confluence works has changed. It's just we're seeing it now, which is painful for some of us, I know, because we have a whole bunch of drafts sitting out there. So I know, Sam, you highlighted a little bit of like what the team went through to get ready for this, because it wasn't like you just turned it on. But
I wish.
yeah. So we still have questions, and we still have concerns, and we still have some demands. So here's what we're going to do for the sake of time. I'm going to ask the questions that I have prepared. We did have the Q&A feature set up, but we don't have it now. So if you have a further question or something you want to like get into the conversation, if you throw it into the chat, please, I think that'll be optimal for time. So let's try to run it that way and see how it goes. So first question, I tried to group the questions on like most important for like right now. So my first question to you, Sam, is why did you release this feature without mass deletion? And this question comes from Jeremy, Elliot, Glenn, and Michael, who are all just kind of struggling with the fact that like it is difficult to go through and manually delete pages or drafts, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a great question. And it is something that our team took like a lot of time to evaluate before we did release. Kind of anticipating that this might be something that customers would start to complain about and cause some frustrations. But I just want to start out by saying that like building this findable drafts feature involved a lot of really high stakes trade-offs. So our team was really trying to balance like performance concerns, cleaning up blank and abandoned drafts in production, and then also taking a lot of effort to make sure that we prevented like any kind of data loss for users. And so while, we always deeply care about all of our customers, and we really want to make an effort to solve for as many edge cases as possible when we release something, sometimes we have to use data to kind of balance out decisions. And what we did with this decision was really balance that based off of reach, impact, confidence, and effort. But I want to actually walk kind of everyone through the data to help you understand a little bit more of like, as a product manager and as our team overall, what is some of that data that we use to actually make this trade-off decision. So the first thing that we did is before launch, just a fun stat for you guys is that 74.8% of drafts are actually completely blank in production. So that means they didn't have a title, any content, no restriction changed, no title, no emoji in title, no cover photo, no content at all. They were completely blank. And so we took steps actually before we rolled out this feature to go ahead and silently delete over 30 million completely blank drafts, for a couple of reasons. One, to improve performance, and then also to help like declutter the page tree and all the other places that people do work on Confluence that drafts were now going to show up. Having said that, though, we knew that there would still be a lot of what we're calling like these abandoned drafts. And our definition for abandoned drafts is really a draft that has a title with no content and it's older than 30 days, or a draft that's untitled and it has like less than 20 characters of body text and it's older than 30 days, or it's a draft that's titled with less than 20 characters of body text and it's older than 30 days. And so this felt like a good way to kind of capture the type of content that might be in a draft state. It's old, you're likely not going to go back and use it. And like you probably like didn't finish it or just like kind of forgot about this draft. And so it's just been sitting there in production for a really long time. And so that's some of the data. So for you guys to know, like if you create a draft, no one else will be able to find or view that draft that you created unless you take a specific action to collaborate with someone and they actually like click the link and enter the editor. And it's the same for you. Like you can't see other people's drafts unless you've become an editor or a collaborator with them. And so with that in mind, we decided that basically if you had 10 abandoned drafts in your page tree, that was kind of the max that we felt an individual user would want or be able to kind of manually delete themselves. And so we took that total number of abandoned drafts that were still left over after we deleted the 30 million blank drafts. And we narrowed it down to find out how many users and space combinations there would be where someone would see more than 10 abandoned drafts. And so that user space combination is basically like, as a user, say I'm in my personal space, I will only see my drafts in my personal space, or the ones that I'm collaborating on with someone else in my personal space. And so we looked at it in terms of that, like as a user, I would go into a space and the max that I would see is like 10 abandoned drafts. We felt like that was kind of the threshold, and anything more than that would start to be kind of frustrating for users. And we wanted to kind of understand what that experience would be like and what the reach and effort and all those things were. And so the results of that is that there were far less than 1,000 individual users who would see more than 10 drafts in a single page tree. So 82% of those individuals would see somewhere between 11 and 20 abandoned drafts. 11% would see somewhere between 21 and 30 abandoned drafts. And then there were a few edge cases where there were more than like 150 abandoned drafts, but it was like a very small percentage of user, like probably less than 10. So with that perspective and all of that data in mind, we made a decision to release this feature without bulk delete, just knowing that it would take actually quite a bit of engineering effort. Building a Confluence, as you guys all know, probably by now, it can be pretty slow. There is a lot of technical debt, but we're also working with code that's like over 20 years old in some instances. And so it's not quite as easy and agile to build things as it is if you're like a startup or something like that. And so just understanding what that bulk delete functionality would be like, we just determined that it was too much effort to build this functionality for the amount of reach and impact those abandoned drafts would have on our total number of users. But we also hypothesized that once drafts were cleaned up, there would be no real need for bulk delete in a long term. Because once you kind of clean up your page tree that first time, then it's pretty manageable after that. And we do have that ability to quickly delete something, quickly delete a draft from the page tree through the More menu or the Quick Actions menu there. So having said all that, like we did want to keep an eye out on feedback from users, like all of you, like the people who've been commenting on the community post. However, we wanted to see if the higher volume of abandoned drafts would impact our workflows significantly. We released this internally and we tested on our own instance, which has, over 6,000 Atlassian users using it. And some of those people have had like a lot of abandoned drafts. They've been here around a lot, or they've been around for a long time. And we didn't have like a lot of really complaints from internal people who were experiencing that. So we really wanted to also see like, would this actually bother people? The small percentage of people that had this kind of experience. So all of that said, obviously this has impacted some people's workflows, and it has caused like quite a bit of frustration. So what I wanted to offer is that if anyone wants to send me an email after this AMA, it's sugulava, UGULAVA @Atlassian.com. I'm happy to work with you one-on-one to kind of help you clean up your page trees. We do have some support resources that can kind of assist with this, but we want to kind of do that on a case-by-case basis. So if it's something that's really, really impacting your workflow, like please reach out and we can kind of figure out a way to help you out there.
All right. Wow. I'm like still stuck on 30 million drafts that the team deleted. But yeah, okay. So like, it's interesting to hear that basically like probably a lot of us who are on the community thread and who are on the AMA or watching the recording of the AMA, we're the edge case. So part of me is like, it would have been nice to hear from you, Sam, before the feature was released rather than now. So yep. Like timing things, maybe we can do this differently next time. But anyway, next question. And again, I'm just trying to go on like what seemed most important to everybody. So like some people talked about, right. It's hard, it takes a little while to clean up drafts manually. Others kind of just liked the way things worked, where like they could create drafts and have them hidden and then go back to those drafts. That seems like quite the minority. I don't think a lot of people knew the drafts were even there. Yeah. And then some people felt that it was problematic for their teams working in a space that was like anonymously accessible. So they would go into that space and see their drafts and feel like, oh my gosh, all my drafts are visible to everyone. That's not really the case, but like some confusion there. So this really, I think it really brings out a bigger question for me, which is like, some of us lived through the removal of wiki markup in Confluence 4, right? And like, we joke about that now, but that was painful for a lot of people, like especially admins or like power users, people writing documentation. Mark Thompson pointed out that individual spaces being pushed out, that was really confusing and hard for some admins, especially. The new editor rollout was like, that was something. That was quite a journey.
Before my time.
Right, before your time. Like in a past life, I worked on another big cloud platform. I've seen how they matured in like rolling out features and understanding what we as admins and power users need as far as that rollout. But why is there no off switch? Right? Especially when we see a feature like page recommendations roll out very recently that can be enabled or disabled. So Pablo, Julia, Mark, Elliot, M. Salon, Gustav, and myself would like to know how do you decide when a feature has an off switch? Like in this case, it doesn't have an off switch. Sort of seems like end of story. How do PMs on the Confluence team decide if a feature should have an off switch? At what level should you be able to turn it off? Like user space, full Confluence level, like who's deciding that? And it seems particularly difficult or painful for us on the Jira side, but we're not talking about Jira, we're just talking about Confluence. So like, how is that decided?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been a Confluence user for a really long time, far before I joined Atlassian. And I know so many customers like myself love Confluence because we have so many power features that can support a variety of workflows. So our admins are some of the most loyal and vocal customers that we have, and we always want to try to solve for their needs, along with just end users of the product as well. I'd say like we don't necessarily have a super consistent framework to make these types of decisions like across Atlassian, which maybe we should. And so this is a good question I'll bring back to kind of our product group. But I can walk you through like why we didn't build an off switch or an admin setting for the findable drafts feature itself. So creating and publishing content is really what powers like all downstream activities in Confluence. So we want to make sure the experience of creating content is as delightful as possible. We want to give users, the building blocks that they need to document and collaborate on their work, while also making that creation process like as smooth as possible. And so right now, we know creating content in Confluence actually comes with like a lot of anxiety for our users. Just click publish and go from 0 to 1,000 in one click and accidentally like notify everyone. That's an example of some of the anxieties that people experience. And so with that in mind, like my team has been working on a 2-year vision called Fearless Creation, where our goal is really to solve for all those anxieties users are facing while creating content in Confluence, lower the learning curve for new users to be able to create, while also still accounting for those power users and making sure that they have, as many tools as they need to kind of get their work done. So a huge part of that fearless creation vision is making drafts more safe, stable, and transparent for our users. So you may have noticed like some of our other recent releases, like the save indicator, the page status, confluence.new, which is a really great feature if you don't know about it. If you type confluence.new in your browser, it will create a draft in your personal space, and other features. So these features all have built on top of the draft state of a page in Confluence. But one thing that we also know is that not being able to find drafts has been like one of the largest downward drivers of customer satisfaction, CSAT. So solving the problem of being able to find those drafts and showing them in all the places that you work has been like a top priority for our team. And since we plan to really continue to build on this draft state itself, we want to make sure that drafts are a consistent core experience across like our entire user base. So there may be some growing pains, I think, in between, but this state and this draft state itself is something that we're making a pretty big investment in to really help people kind of manage that content creation flow. And they have been super hidden in the past. And the fact that people haven't been able to kind of go back and find those drafts, we know that that is like one of the largest like downward drivers of customer satisfaction. So yeah, we hope people can kind of bear with us while we're in this a bit of these kind of growing pains a little bit, but I think people will find that having that draft state and having that consistent user experience is actually going to yield some really great results for people.
We're just in that really painful changing
Transition.
point. I mean, a few of us are like hearing you trot out the CSAT numbers. That's again where it's like, maybe I'm in the like very small minority of users who are like struggling with this change, and everybody else is like, where are my drafts?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time, and I'm thinking we need to go a little more rapid fire, because some of these questions are a little bit more like kind of like features that you've requested, or at least the next two, just some feature ideas. So one from Eric twice. I see you, Eric. And also Steve asked, and let's try to answer these in like a minute or so. Do you have any plan for like an admin view? So Confluence admin can see all the drafts out there, kind of maybe looking at the same kind of stats your team looked at to view if they're abandoned, and then potentially delete all of them.
Yep. So it's a great question. At the moment, we don't have any immediate plans, but we are really open to suggestions. So I speak pretty often with our community leaders, many of which are admins. But I'd love to hear from like more of the people that were commenting on the community posts, if we haven't chatted in the past, to just kind of hear, what would you like to see in an admin view? What problems are you facing now, and kind of how can we help? I think the one thing that we have to balance is that we do know that there's a lot of anxiety, again, about creating content in Confluence. And that idea of having drafts that are like exposed to others really makes it hard for people to write something. I think across the board, people have kind of a fear of writing in general. So we're always trying to balance that end user experience of being able to kind of openly be able to create content and open that up in the stages as it goes through kind of the natural workflow of content creation, but also balancing that with admins who are having to manage a lot of content for other people. So not at the moment, but definitely opening to hearing like what an admin view would look like, and some of the problems that we can maybe help solve together.
All right. So Elliot and Steve, that is your invitation to send an email to Sam with your ideas for what an admin UI should look like. Or maybe you want it to be automated and those drafts just disappear. Dream up something big, email it to Sam. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. So next is a question from Christian around workflows. So Christian pointed out you have now a draft label that lives in the page tree. You have page/content statuses that you can set on pages and blog posts. And then there's also like unpublished changes. You have draft pages, you have published pages, all these different like states and statuses. Is there any thought of like bringing those all together and like building some kind of nice content creation workflow as opposed to like all these different statuses and states? And again, you only have like a minute.
Yep. So yeah, really good piece of feedback in the comments from the community posts. One thing that's become really apparent to me after launching Findable Drafts has just been how confusing draft as a actual page state versus draft as a page status can be for some of our users. So in our mind, drafts are defined as a never published page. Whereas statuses and updates, unpublished changes are actions that go on top of that kind of underlining draft, like state of a draft, or a rendered view, like a page, or an editor view, like those updates. So we know there's more work to be done here, and we want to definitely think more deeply about that.
All right, Christian, email your dreams to Sam and she will distribute. That's what I'm hearing. I think it's an amazing question, and I want to see that come to, come in the future, but I'm glad at least to see that some of this stuff is being surfaced, which like a lot of this hasn't been in the past. So that's great. And we make a lot of videos at K15T about using Confluence, and I do not shy away when I'm like a little bit critical of how you access a certain feature. And there are some where I'm excited to see what is to come. Yep. Okay, so here's another one that Elliot pointed out, which was about, there's this really cool announcement about the feature, and then like we start, having people struggling with it, and then we trot out the term MVP, right? And that, minimal viable product, that's a product term, if you're not familiar with it, which is sometimes that means we launched just the simplest, barely functional thing out there to appease the use case that we were trying to appease. Sometimes it's more than that, if we're lucky, it's more than that. But that is a rough term in the product world because it can mean different things. So I think the pain that was felt was, you're telling us it's an MVP, so it's not complete. But what you just told us, Sam, with some of these numbers is like, it's complete for like 92% of us. And for the rest of us, right, it's like we will have pain for, a month as we're cleaning these up and then never again. So is there any sort of, in these announcements, is there any sort of effort to like explain to those of us who are on the edges, like, I get you, we don't have the feature that would make your life perfect, rather than us being like, oh, this is an MVP and they didn't think about me.
Yeah. So thanks to whoever asked this question in community. Like, honestly, it didn't occur to me to include something like that in a future announcement until now. So like, as you mentioned, Matt, that is a product term. So like internally, we talk about features in terms of product development phases. Things like beta versus MVP versus version 1, V1, V2, etc. But if that's something that's useful for people in community and our customers, like, I'm happy to start including that in future announcements, and can encourage other PMs to do the same as well.
Awesome. I think like kind of what we're doing right now, this like window into your world, I think helps a lot of us power users, admins, longtime users with the why. Yeah, especially when you come with a bunch of data, Sam. This is great. Okay, so the last question that I have, and I have not seen any other dropped into the chat, so if you have one, get it in there. So both Confluence and Jira users have experienced for years, we submit an idea or we vote on a Jira issue for a feature that's been out there for 10 years. And it's like, why can I not? Well, I almost use the example of why can I not view comments in the editor? But that was finally added, right? We've seen them printed on t-shirts before, like poking fun at the fact that like some issues are not addressed, but then it's like, I'm getting page headers now. Like, what's going on? There's like the eternal product question. And thank you, Mark, for asking that. So Sam, like, how does your team and the other teams, working on Confluence decide whether to go back and address these very specific technical debt features, or like roll out something like this, which is like kind of a visual change attached to some tech debt? Like, how do you sleep how do you sleep at night, Sam?
I don't sleep at night.
Okay. That is
so yeah, I know this is always like a top of mind question, especially for our power users and longtime customers. And to be honest, my team and I have spent a lot more time in the last couple of quarters really looking at those Jack tickets and the votes that are coming in. And I can tell you that like across Confluence, like we are investing more and more resources into major tickets that have a lot of customers that have voted on them. We're not perfect, but we always want to kind of balance that, keeping the lights on KTLO, fixing things that already exist, and that future growth, future roadmap, as we continue to bring in more and more users to Confluence, but also want to make sure that we're maintaining, a really good product for the people who've been around for a long time. So one thing I'll just say is that there are two major metrics we use when it comes to road mapping our team's work. The first is CSAT, so that's customer satisfaction. We look at like what are the pain points and experiences that are causing the lowest user satisfaction, and then looking to address things like that. And that's really where like this findable drafts feature came out of, was that we know, again, like losing drafts is one of the highest or the largest like downward drivers of customer satisfaction. So CSAT's one way we think about it. The other is user impact score. And this is like a formula that we've used to rank our Jack tickets on the impact that they have on users. So we are moving into a phase where there'll be more pressure on individual teams to kind of make a larger investment in this type of work and in our roadmaps. So the thing I can say here is that I know we haven't been perfect. It can be really frustrating, but I hope you can be patient with us, because we are making a really big effort internally to get better at that.
Building a platform or building an app on a platform is a lot harder. My last team, we went from building our little homemade web app to building an app on a cloud platform, and it is so rough. And that bug that we were going to fix, well, 3 of our 3,000 customers are using that bug, and it would cause them great pain if we, change it. But Sam, I just wanted you to tell me that you're going to make all the changes that I want to Confluence now.
Hey, we had custom panels to come back. That was
That's right, custom panels.
I'll tell you that when I joined Atlassian, I like took this job as a Confluence user because I was like, oh my gosh, I really need panels, like better panels back in my life. And it's so nice. I didn't build that feature. One of our amazing other PMs did, but on my team, and I'm so happy to see that.
Yes. I love that the default icon is a rainbow, because it's so true. And then also, like, I remember when we transitioned to Confluence Cloud, that was the big volcano eruption of feedback. Where are my custom panels? And I was like, wow, everybody, like, I know you're all artsy, but geez. Let's see. Got a comment from Jimmy. It would, not necessarily for you, Sam, because you've done a fantastic job here, but it would be great if someone from Atlassian shared more about the customer scoring system for JAC. What is that? Tickets. Yeah, I cannot remember what that
stands for too.
Jira something. Yes. Yep. And community posts, so people have a better understanding of what goes on behind the scenes. I think that's a great idea, Jimmy. I remember that Salesforce has one of those for their community idea exchange. They kind of tell you like how they bubble stuff up, especially if there's CSAT scores that are independent of Jack and the community. Andy said, thank you so much for your honesty and openness, Sam, which of course, there it is. It's jira.atlassian.com. Thank you, Jimmy. I knew what it was, but I couldn't remember. Too many acronyms in this world.
Yep.
Yeah. So that would be amazing to know, like, how is this actually happening? Because we look at that roadmap online and it's like, okay, so that's not what I expected. Like, why is HIPAA compliance on there? I don't need HIPAA compliance. Like, what's going on? What are y'all thinking?
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely feedback I can kind of bring back to the larger product team here at Confluence, and see what we can do about being a little bit more transparent and helping kind of people understand just, again, that prioritization process that they go through, because we do know that it's something people really struggle to understand. And I hope that coming out of this AMA, being a little bit more open, kind of sharing how we make some of these trade-off decisions and giving you a bit more of a window into some of the really, really challenging high stakes trade-offs we do have to make, how we go about that does help people at least have a little bit of empathy that we are working really hard internally to try to make Confluence the best product that we can. I love Confluence. I love creating content on Confluence. And so, yeah, there's a whole team here that is really passionate about bringing the best experiences to our customers, and finding ways to better communicate kind of where we are and how we're going about things. I think we can get better at that. So that's feedback I'll take back to our product group.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think if you cut any one of us, we all bleed Confluence blue. But, you know, Sam, like, to pass to the PMs, I would say that the people that are commenting on every feature release, the people that are at AMAs like this, we can be the biggest cheerleaders with Confluence shirts on at family gatherings. And people are like, what is that? But we're also the people that are going to wear the, you know, the name of a Confluence Jira issue that's been out there for 10 years to Team 23, right? We're passionate about it. We love this thing as much as you do. So, like, I don't know what it takes to make us your cheerleaders, but I think this is a good first step.
Yep. Awesome. I'm glad. Yeah. I hope we can do more of these in the future. And yeah, I think it's good to bring people along with some of our thinking with these things.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody for hanging on, even though we were hanging out in the wrong Zoom meeting, and hopefully we get to do another one of these again soon. Have a great day, and, you know, continue to make the Atlassian community amazing with your respectful perspectives. See you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.